All right, we're at 10:45, and so I'm sure there'll be a few stragglers in. But first of all, I'd just like to welcome everybody to the Winter Games, and joining us for the Smart Campus panel. As Sabrina put into the chat, this is stories to inspire action and share successes. And not only am I going to wish everyone good morning, but also good evening. As I saw from the keynote this morning, we have attendees joining us from around the globe. So that's great to see that people are either staying up late or getting up early to come and join us today. So that's great. And also, if you get a second, maybe in the Zoom's chat, if you want to say who you are and where you're from, that might help the panelists know where you're coming from. And also, I'll be asking in a few minutes for you to start putting any questions out there. So I think the format today is we're going to have about 30 minutes of some questions we ask the panelists, and then we're going to have ask the attendees to put in their questions as well. So for those of you who are wondering who this talking head is right here, I'm John Rome, the Deputy CIO at Arizona State University, and glad to be part of that. And being that I grew up part of my childhood in Minnesota, I'm also a huge Winter Games fan. And if you ask me what my favorite sport is, it's curling. So if you don't know what curling is, make sure you look it up. But I would say that that's my favorite sport. If you do have another favorite sport, put that into the chat as well. But we have a bunch of distinguished panelists here today. Let me share my screen here quickly. I'm going to take that away from you, Sabrina, and hopefully everybody can see that now. But we have some distinguished panelists today. Not only, we decided we'd mix it up a little bit today too as well. Not only do we have panelists from universities or institutions, we thought we would bring in one of our vendor partners who might bring in another interesting look at, as we start sharing some of these stories and around smart campus successes. And so I'm going to quickly name the panelists, and then I'm going to give you guys a few minutes to tell us who you are and a little bit more about yourselves. So we have Chris Richardson, who's the Deputy CIO from Arizona State University. We have Heath Price from the University of Kentucky, and Barak Weinisman from Cox 2M. And maybe I'll start with you, Barak, because I know what Cox is, but I have no idea what Cox 2M is. So maybe you can start by telling us who you are, and then I'll go to the other panelists. So thanks for being here.
Of course. Thank you, John. And thank you, everyone, for joining. Happy New Year to everyone. So I'm Barak Weinisman. I'm the VP and General Manager of Cox 2M for Cox Communications. A lot of you that are in Arizona may know Cox as a leading broadband and video and voice provider. Those of you that are not in the market we serve may not have heard of us. Cox is a family-owned business, very diverse company. We own everything from an internet business to Kelley Blue Book, if you ever use that, as being also one of the largest players in the automotive space. I specifically work for Cox Communications, which is a broadband and video provider. In 2018, we started Cox 2M for the company in a unit that starts new ventures for the company. And we're focusing on commercial IoT solutions. We want to connect those environments out there, massive amount of assets that are not connected, and that can drive tremendous positive impact into our lives. So Cox 2M is that unit for Cox, and we mostly focus on the automotive, agriculture, and smart communities spaces. And we've been a partner of ASU and many other entities in the Arizona market for a good chunk of time now. I'm really excited to be with you all. I'm originally from Israel, if you cannot figure out the accent. So we didn't have much snow growing up, but now I've picked up skiing since moving to the US 15 years ago. And that's my favorite sport.
All right, well, thanks, Barak, for being here. I'm going to turn it over to Heath now. Tell us a little bit about yourself before we get started.
Yeah, absolutely. Same here. Great to be here. And thank you, John and others for putting this all together and the hard work that goes on to make these events happen, especially after a long break. So my name is Heath Price. I work at UK, University of Kentucky, here in Lexington. I am the Associate CIO in our IT organization. My history is I've kind of grown up around higher ed, both on campuses. So I worked at LSU, now work at UK, but I've also worked in the private sector in partnership with campuses. So I've sat kind of on both sides of the table over approaching the last 20 years and have really enjoyed that opportunity to to think about what a campus needs and how do you deliver kind of both the problem solving and the collaboration that it takes to achieve big goals. So yeah, I'm really excited to be a part of this.
All right, great. Thanks, Heath. And last but not least, Chris, tell us a little about yourself.
Hi, everyone. Chris Richardson here, Deputy CIO at ASU, also part of the University Technology Office. I lead our product ownership, the productization of our tools, as well as leadership development. Also kind of excited, launching a podcast this week called The Urban Complex. So it's got a smart cities theme. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of education stories too. So it's a little bit about me. Looking forward to the panel.
All right, Chris, you're not going to get away. You're going to have to tell us a little bit more about that, about the podcast before you go. But, maybe we'll start with you at the questioning, Chris. Tell us, maybe just give a brief overview of your smart campus journey so far, and maybe one or two highlights.
It's definitely not my smart campus initiative. There's so much that goes into it, but I think I'll start with when I joined. ASU was fortunate to have a partnership underway with Intel, and they had donated some sensors that were going into the ASU football stadium and looking at a number of parameters. And one of the stipulations was find something, a way that fans could actually engage with this, which was cool. And then also a great one was collaborating with another Intel donated stadium in Ireland, in the Dublin Croke Park. And so those were kind of the parameters, and the team decided to create a sound game. And literally from talking to other vendors that serve stadiums or arenas, as far as we know, we're still the only sound game that in the world, football, basketball, soccer, that has real sound data that's interactive. So that was really neat. That happened about 5.5 years ago. We've iterated on that game. It's done on our Jumbotron, and we even know, we can tell if those have our Asu Mobile App. We can tell them which section, if they won, they were in the winning sound game. So it's kind of fun to see how that went. We've now brought in units across our campus to start explore how to work with facilities in a unique and smart, connected way. The Cox Collaboratory, how we've built a relationship with Barak and others, kind of has opened doors to what's possible. We do things smart with groups. We're modernizing our network and Wi-Fi so we can connect these things. Done work with Amazon Web Services. So there's a lot to it, but I think that's kind of an impetus of how we got started. So I'll happily go further when we dig into some areas.
So Chris, I think you just burst my bubble, because I just thought every time I was at a home game and when they asked for sound noise, I didn't know that was just an image that they put up there that they weren't actually capturing. So that's really great to know that that's actually the case. And, so when we talk about smart campuses, we know that smart campuses are really typically part of a smarter community or a smarter city. But maybe Heath, I'll ask you, what makes a smart campus, or maybe in the reverse, what are a campus smart? Would you say?
Yeah, it's great. I've thought about that in a lot of our campus dialogue. I kind of, in zooming out, I kind of like the latter versus the former, right? So what makes a campus smart? And our approach really has been thinking about the future, which sounds a little cliche, but how are we getting smarter? And some of that gets back to, how do we define it? I think one of the things that I think about this panel and thinking about some of the voices and brains that are on this, that are listening, one of the challenges that we've run into is, what does digital transformation, so let's kind of take smart campus, what does digital transformation really mean to you, to a campus? And what we have found in a lot of our internal dialogue, and then even more so with our external dialogue, is it really means something different to each group, each entity, each business or campus that we visited with, that how that is defined. So I think that both challenges us to think about, what is our future, where are we heading, but it also gives us some confidence to know that there is no prescription or path that you have to follow. Who are we as a University of Kentucky? And then when we really zoom out from that, what are the ills, or what are the challenges, both in our community and across our state, that we want to be a part of trying to solve. And I think as we zoomed out from that, we began to really start to identify some priorities that we wanted to focus on first, and that we think will continue to lead us forward in that smart campus strategy. So how are we being smart as a campus? And one of the things we really looked at early on was this idea of IT abundance. When I first got to UK a little over 3 years ago, they had done a pretty deep dive in looking at how IT was serving the campus, and IT abundance was something that really came out of that. So how were we doing that? Well, one of the first places we focused is by looking at our students and the needs of technology in their hands, how we can start to satisfy some of those needs. And that has really led us into our partnership with Apple, where we're taking on an iPad strategy, where we're starting to put iPads in the hands of our students. So that zooming out, that identifying, right, what we need to tackle within our campus and for our community has been really key.
All right, great. Thanks, Heath. And it's interesting you talk about, I sort of sense this sort of student focus, which is great, but really how do you get the input or the requirements from this student community? What are some of the ways that you're trying to elicit some of these requirements? And I'll leave that open for anyone on the panel to answer that question.
I can say in our case, I think it's a good combination of listening and then paying attention. Those aren't always the same thing. So, we do not hurt for a very vocal student community in our campus, around 30,000 total students. And that's a really good thing, right? Our students have no problem being passionate about a variety of topics, and they want ears to listen. So we're fortunate to have that. But I also think in the example for us in pursuing the Apple partnership, we have a lot of data. Chris referencing it a minute ago, and they're in the example with Intel and working with Cox. In our case, right, we know our network data really, really well. We have other streams of data that we can bring together. And in studying that, right, and spending time on that, we knew that Apple devices were over 80% of the devices that hit our wireless network on a day-to-day basis across a given semester. Obviously, that data is pre-COVID, but in the normal stead of how our campus would operate. So that for us did speak volumes in how we focused our energy and effort on who we wanted to talk to as it related to devices.
And Heath, as a data fan, we'll come back to that in a second. So,
sure.
About data, but go ahead, Chris. And then I think that Barak just is waiting in the wings too. I know you can't keep quiet out there, but Chris, please answer.
Yeah, I think at Arizona State University, the student centricity starts culturally. One of the important things, when Dr. Crow came, I think 2002, he inherited a faculty-centric university. And so a lot started about the culture and turning it into a student-centric culture. It's even in our charter. We are known as an inclusive university as opposed to an exclusive university. And we don't just leave it there, just letting anyone in. We actually measure ourselves with success on how the students succeed. And so I think then one of the other things when I joined, I've seen Lev, our CIO, who's on here as well, really take this to the next levels. How do we embed student centricity into our IT stack, into our product teams, design? So things we do, the Asu Mobile App has really advanced some ways. We built it with students in mind. We didn't just go to the administration who thinks they represent the student. We actually asked the student, we had some hypotheses from the administration that represents the student, but we actually went out and asked the students we did a survey before we started building the mobile app. We had students as part of the team that builds the mobile app. And then we also have, we've built over 2,000 students that are in a database that will give us feedback on a regular basis as part of our product cycles. And then we're starting to do that for other tools, products and services that we're doing. I think that's really important. So it starts with the culture, include them to build, ask them for feedback, plus, just when they give us feedback directly in the app or with other tools, we respond. I think there's kind of a repeatable cycle there that would be good to emulate for others.
And Barak, do you have anything to add there?
I would just say, I think Lev and Chris do a great job in this respect. Since the first time we met, they talk in terms of identifying challenges and how do you approach the student community in identifying those challenges. But then there's another facet of student engagement where, like you heard from Heath, where you have the data flowing. And now we can see what devices are on the network. We can see usability stats and metrics. We have raw data that we will never get to because it's, comes in volumes from multiple sensors around the campus. And you can open that in a structured way via hackathons and just invite the students into the creation process, not just the input and the feedback process. And that's been really important. And the guys emphasized having a community-facing forum for everything that they do in terms of a portal that can solicit feedback and engage the student community. So I think that's really cutting edge in terms of engaging, not just listening to what they need, which is typical customer discovery, but truly weaving them into the creation process at ASU.
So clearly, we know that students are some of our constituents out there, but I'm also wondering of who are some of the other constituents on campus, and maybe the other question, we had to mix it up a little bit on this panel. Who of those get it and who don't get it in terms of a smart city or a smart campus?
Well, I can jump in. We work with many different stakeholders and in different environments that are trying to get smart. I would say the biggest gap that we're seeing in terms of actually achieving smart is you see a lot of folks focus on technology, which is very intuitive and it's a very safe place. But you see a lot of the vendors as well getting to the table with, here's what I have and this is a solution. And focusing on the ins and outs of the technology. So it's been very interesting, talking to Heath, talking to Chris and other stakeholders. There are many CIOs and CIO teams that get it. But what you heard a bit today, focus on the problem that you're trying to solve. And not just from a functionality perspective, you need to solve it. And yes, that requires technology, but you also need to scale it. You can be as disruptive as you want, but if you're not scaling something, you're not going to realize impact that we're all after, both from a business impact perspective, as well from a community perspective and positive impact. So you really need to scale the solution. And at that point, you really need to start thinking about things like, how do you fund it? Who's going to pay for that? Especially for those of you who are working in the smart city space as well in the smart campus space. That's a major issue, right? Not just the feasibility of the complexity of the solutions and making sure that they actually work and that the battery lasts and all of those great things, but actually that you can scale that solution. Again, going back to our partnership with ASU, I think a very interesting approach that we saw early on from Lev and the team was, how do we look into everything we have in flight in the technology space and think about the art of the possible and what we can create and bring all of those different stakeholders that have multiple interests in a city environment, in a campus environment, to have a unified conversation around delivering today's solution, but also thinking about tomorrow's solutions. And I think that's how you uncover different ways of doing things, different business model, partnerships, and frankly, funding pools that allow you to get stuff done.
I think at ASU, we had to build a lot of trust. When I joined, there was this kind of feeling that data was okay to be in silos, and units or departments or functions kind of had their own little fiefdoms of data. And so it was kind of who got it? Well, it was the ones that we could get to the table to have the conversation, to look at something differently. My perspective, not being a long time higher education individual, was that many of the higher ed IT departments that I collaborated with when I first joined, and or departments among ASU at that time, 5.5 years ago, were kind of in this operational mindset. They had great process. They're good at what they were doing, but the tools to make a smart campus are completely different. You want to be cloud enabled. You want to evolve your network. You want to co-create solutions with your functional stakeholders that change the game using data. They often have better insights and know kind of where the puck's going, so to speak, whereas the IT group knows how to get there technically and surface the data from a different point. And so those who got it were the ones that were willing to take the risk with us. But then, you also have to work with the security channels, the procurement channels, the privacy channels, the legal channels, and it was doing that together that built the trust to bring people together. And now, because we've been doing it for years, and we've through the pandemic, Lev now has a seat at the executive table as well. We're just getting way more buy-in quicker to do things that we couldn't have done when in that kind of operational mindset. So to me, it's that it's building the trust and tackling. So now, we've got conversations going on with facilities and parking and the library and different schools and academically, and our research has come to the table that wants to take these things. We've got data sets that are just, they couldn't get, and so they want to come and get NSF grants with us. And so it's just raising the bar in many ways.
Heath, any final thoughts on that question before we move on?
I love the way both Barak and Chris just framed that up. So I think the thing to me, just to maybe put out there an element of encouragement, right, to those listening and those looking for ideas or ways to kind of come out of this with the takeaways, is Chris's example of having a CIO at that table. That does not come because, she or he is viewed as the smartest person in the room, right? Oftentimes it's much more about that person being viewed as a collaborator. And I don't know if I shared this in my first example back to you, John, but this matrix is the word we've used a lot, right? We want to be matrixed as a campus, and IT fitting within that matrix and being very much a collaborator across areas like student and academic life, across many of our deans. That is the only way we're going to be able to really zoom out and understand where the needs are, because they will continue to shift and change.
All right, thanks. And clearly there's a lot of mention of interest in data. Our panelists, you just answered some of the questions with data. I see a couple of the chats out there talking about either too much data, which I think is a good problem, as well as Lev posted a YouTube video out there. So when we talk about data, really, here's a question: How do on your campuses, how have you developed a data culture, first of all, and then really have you built a governance structure around that data? So interested to see if what you've learned in that process as well. Any takers on that question?
I will definitely take it. And I would say first and foremost, I've been at UK for just over 3 years. This is an area where I would say as a university, we are 2 steps forward and sometimes, and oftentimes have been in my time here, 2 steps back. We've not been always marching forward productively when it comes to how we approach the data, John, but also, right, how we make effective use of it. So we have areas, and I would say one example of this is with our student and academic life group. We have really a strong joint partnership relationship. That matrix is working as it relates to how our IT group and how the folks that deal with filtering the data, understanding the data, right, pushing the data out, making sure that it can make sense both in how it's communicated, but also how we ask more questions through it. We really have a strong partnership with that student and academic life group, which helps us when we're pursuing enrollment, right? It's helped us when we pursue some of this understanding of the needs of our students. At the same time, we have other areas on the campus where the desire, whether it's our desire in IT sometimes or other areas of the campus where the silo is what people really want. They want for it to be firewalled off, for it to be theirs. And that might come up in areas of research. It might come up in certain other areas of study or pursuits. And, I think the way that I've approached that and being and desiring to be a bridge builder is that at some level, when we do this zooming out, we have to prioritize, because we're not going to tackle all of those, and we're not going to win all of those or find the right partnerships. And so where are maybe the soft spots relationally where we can see fruit, or where are going to be some of the priorities where we have to lean into it because our community and campus are going to demand it. And then, what steps do we need to take to accomplish that?
And I mentioned earlier that helping get bridges to where groups want to add data so it's not siloed and you have cross views. We now have entire academic units that have built their own kind of co-creation data units with our central UTO data teams. Our Ed Plus online group has a co-created data unit. Our provost has a co-created data unit. And so it's just great to see that you have kind of this functional and technical groups coming together with the intent of governance, asking questions, connecting new things to shed light. We have new bodies that are forming. I know John's role. He helped he was kind of the grandfather of our data practices and done amazing things. And now we're embedding data into our product teams. We're embedding a data mindset into our service teams with our partners. John, how big was the data conference? I mean, it was about 200 3 years ago. And I think we surpassed 1,200 people around ASU joined this year. So we're trying to make data.
Yeah, clearly there's a huge appetite for data that we didn't expect. A conference that we used to cap off at 500 people, that they would sign up around our campus just to attend that particular event. So clearly there's a huge need for and want for data. Barak, any words on data?
I'm going to agree with Heath on this one. I think for the industry, if we specifically talk about commercial IoT and sensors that generate data, I think the industry is still in a place that we need to figure out how to connect those environments and effectively extract the data versus being in the stage that we're all excited about and that we want to get to, of sharing that data securely, monetizing that data as an additional funding mechanism in the right ways in order to propel this industry and the smartness, if you will, for it. But from my experience, we're very early on, and most of the challenges and the focus that I still see is let's effectively get the data out, use it to first improve the use case, but we have some road to go in terms of sharing it and monetizing it.
Yeah, and as being a data guy, I couldn't agree more. And not only is there just huge value in this data, there's also a lot of noise in the data. So also as part of it, as you have IoT sensors going off every millisecond, how do you take out that noise and make it valuable out there? So I'm just going to say one thing. They talk about data being the new oil. I'm going to say that data is the new bacon. So that's what it is. So when we talk about it's no longer the new oil, it's the new bacon out there. So the next question is really all of the work that you've done on your campuses or Barak through your work out there. What are some of the examples of the impact that you've had? Maybe focus on the good impact, and if there's any sort of negative outcome that might have come from that.
I think it's fascinating, and I would love to hear from Chris and Heath here as well. But I think it's fascinating when you start looking at the problems, like Heath said, in terms of use case by use case. And we don't even understand the scale and the impact of having things not connected effectively. So if you just look at ASU, just by very early on identifying the need with Lev and Chris to set up a dedicated IoT network that allows sensors to communicate effectively in a cost-effective manner with very long battery life, etc. And you just put that in place and you start seeing the amount of use cases that single activity unlocks. And then you combine that with hardware innovation, software innovation, and suddenly you can address things like student success and how do we get students with accessibility issues, to get to the right shuttle on time, no matter what the weather, to get to class on time. How do you know where to park, even if it's your bicycle or board, on campus? And just looking at that use case, we see tremendous amount of investment from universities in just managing thousands and thousands of bicycle racks. If you look at, walkways that people should not be using a vehicle, even if it's a bicycle, on for safety, and you can start monitoring, tracking, and what are the flows, and how do you not just slap people with compliance, but enable them with better parking, better routes, better tools at the right place at the right time. So I always say it's funny when you talk to folks about the commercial IoT solution. Initially, they say, "I just want to solve this one thing." But when you invest upfront in some of the infrastructure via those solutions to use cases, the appetite and the art of the possible start bubbling up. So those are a couple of the examples. I would say we're still early on driving that impact to scale, but we see tremendous promises to those concepts and already early impact in this partnership.
Yeah, I agree, Barak. I think if you look at this traditionally with a business case mindset, oftentimes what you're trying to achieve doesn't pencil out in terms of return, right? And so, but as the cost of sensors is significantly decreasing, as the ability to scale with cloud and data solutions is decreasing for handling all this, and if you can modernize your people internally and or your partners that you're working with to take action and experiment, then you're positioning yourself when you can scale these things. And so, I mentioned our Asu Mobile App. I mean, it was amazing how we were in the right place at the right time to really capitalize on something, and now we've got a platform to use. Now we have all the data it collects. So I often will tell people, hey, think big but start small, and find a place to build the partnership with a unit where you're going together to invest together. It makes it a lot easier to get funding, to experiment and innovate when it's not just IT trying to do, it's just they're trying to do a pet project again. And so I think those are some things we've seen. And now we're investing in some ways like the blue lights for any of those at their university that these call boxes that are sitting on campus just doing nothing. We've got some really interesting tricks up our sleeve to turn those into something that really matters and actually helps the student in a way that in the campus to envision sensors and understand traffic of all types, but also make a safer and more secure environment for the student, which is what the intent of those polls were in the first place. And so it's just trying things and being ready at the right time, because it will happen. I mean, when you can automate things to make better decisions without having to have people in the middle of it, I mean, we're doing a lot of that already, and IoT and a smart campus mindset will help that tremendously as the business case comes to the forefront.
And Heath, what are some of the impacts that you've seen? Because we clearly sought you out when we've seen all the great stuff you've done at the University of Kentucky. So what's some of the impact that you've seen on your campus?
I think going back now 2.5 years, I do think that we have really focused early on things that are very tangible. So I've referenced the devices and the partnership with Apple. We have had a lot of focus on the area of esports and video games, as that is a space that that ear to the ground with the students has really been something that, as we've paid attention, we have found a really strong interest level, not just about people that want to play games, but folks that are just interested in that sector, in that world, and wanting to learn more about it and wanting to be involved in it. And so we have spent efforts there, both creating programming and finding partnerships that would help us to become more savvy and more understanding in ways that we believe can really serve our community, our area of Lexington, and kind of this area between Lexington and Louisville that is really very vibrant and has a strong startup element to it. So things that for us that have been really tangible have played really, really well. The other thing I want to mention, and I've just had this idea as I'm listening, or had this thought as I'm listening to Barak and Chris talk through some really good points that I was thinking, I don't know that I can even keep up with some of the things that they're doing. I mean, the examples that Arizona State is known for currently across higher ed for sure, and I'm sure other sectors, it really stands alone. I mean, there are a lot of folks, myself included, that are paying attention to what's happening at Arizona State and saying, okay, well, yeah, I mean, we probably haven't even thought of that yet, but right, where do we start? Well, one of the things that has been interesting as we look back over these last couple of years is when we look at our own campus and see things that are happening that didn't start within our smart campus efforts. I mean, John, to answer your first question, or reach back to your first question of what makes a campus smart, we have found it really inspiring to look across and see other things happening. And then as we see those things happening, figure out how we can help, even if that project is never going to be under the umbrella of the matrixed smart campus approach, that we're working on day in, day out. And so one example that stands out to me is the challenges that Kentucky as a state has in this opioid crisis. I mean, we are at the epicenter of the opioid crisis in America. And we have a pretty strong group of people on our healthcare side that pursued a grant about 2.5 years ago now that resulted in an $87 million grant to the University of Kentucky that is completely focused on reducing opioid deaths in 16 of our counties in the state of Kentucky. Now that's the largest grant we have ever received as a university. That effort, that charge, the meaning behind that, we're all asking, how do we contribute? What do you need? Whether that's with my IT hat on, or whether I think about that within some of the things maybe we've done or we're learning as we work these smart campus efforts. And so we've taken a lot of inspiration from that. And I think looking outside of ourselves beyond our campus, we take inspiration from examples like Arizona State, where we just think, that is what we want to be about. We want to be about solving problems, whether we start the idea or whether we hopefully come alongside those that have started it.
Heath, that's a great answer. So thanks. And plus it's just a great story to hear about that large grant as well. We have looks like we have about 7 or 8 minutes left. There's one question out there that one of our attendees had. What opportunities are presented by the COVID-19 crisis to accelerate the smart city efforts? I'm sure we all have an answer for that out there.
I can jump in. I've seen, as I mentioned earlier, that came from Lev. COVID has really elevated the spotlight on IT, and it's been great to be part of that. I know ASU has branded a modality we call ASU Sync, which is the kind of ability to still attend a classroom, but in person or remote, and have it facilitated in unique ways. I referenced the Asu Mobile App a few times. We've built our own daily health check. We've integrated systems so that all of our testing efforts can interoperate with our exposure management, as well as keep people safe by putting in whether they have symptoms or not, and then giving them options to test. Now we're preparing for what we do about vaccines and how we might have green zones and or allow people access to different areas depending on whether they're vaccinated. So there's a lot we're doing. I think the question was meant to be broader. And I mentioned these blue lights, and I mentioned our partnership with Cox, and I mentioned our partnership with Amazon Web Services. Like, we're really thinking big in that we see the environment differently, and we're looking to leverage that now. More visibility for IT. We've got this trust in the past. How do we turn our campus into improved network, improved cloud services, improved data skills, and take these partnerships to the next level? So I think it's knowing what you know and where you want to invest, knowing which vendors have skills and expertise you don't, and really thinking big. And so it's a great question.
Okay, so we have 5 minutes left, and so I think this will be, here's a good question for the group or for the panelists. So maybe one piece of advice for those that are just starting this journey out there. Maybe that's one piece, and I think let's also, we talked about, if you looked at the title and the description of this presentation, when we look out 20 years, just name one thing that will be available to us in 20 years. Let's look at that crystal ball and see what's out there. So let's maybe start with advice, to one piece of advice, and then look at that crystal ball and what one cool thing will be there 20 years from now. So whoever wants to start.
Yeah, I can jump in, John. I would say, and this is a simple advice, when you're in the commercial IoT solution space, start with solving a problem, and make sure that a single use case pays for the solution. If I had 10% on every business case that I've seen that combines 20 different use cases in order to pay for a single sensor-based solution, I'd be pretty well off, because those business cases, the complexity is already so high in implementing a solution that those business cases are very hard to actually execute on, no matter if you're a vendor or if you're a customer or a campus. I think if we look forward, there'll be a point in time that we're not going to talk about the space as commercial IoT, and I truly believe that connectivity is going to be just embedded in everything that we do. If you think about the industry today, a lot of what we do is putting aftermarket solution sensors on environments that were not smart to begin with. 20 years forward, I believe that will be different.
So Barak, looking at your crystal ball, what do you see in 20 years from now that we wouldn't expect? What's going to be the next iPhone that we didn't expect in 2007? Or what is the next smart city technology?
Well, frankly, I think the answer is like we had smartphones in 2000, but it required simplicity and frictionless experience to make it the common dominating environment. I think that will be the same thing with commercial IoT and smart environments. More embedded, more coming out of the box, and the right players that making it truly frictionless and out there. The innovation of smartphone, in my opinion, did not come in 2007, but the innovation in simplicity and removing of friction was the game-changing element.
Very, very good point. All right, Chris and Heath, we have a few more minutes left, and I'm sure everyone's dying to hear your answer. So let's do this.
Go ahead, Heath.
Yeah, I think for me, as I look back really over 20 years, not necessarily just the last 3, I think just speaking and talking and listening externally. As I sit on a campus, externally, for me often means beyond our campus walls, but it can also mean outside of just our IT organization and getting into either other colleges or other areas. But I've really valued being outside of the campus walls. Current COVID scenario has provided more opportunities for that in my case, and being able to be remote a lot. And so therefore, seeking out more of those chances. And so I really value opportunities like this to get to come and participate in a few days of listening, learning, and getting to engage. The notes that I often go back to are ideas. They inspire me, so I get inspired by hearing people talk about ideas. Hearing others talk about what they're doing, just encouraging. It just helps to know how people are doing that work, and then seeing other people struggle is often therapeutic. And I think when I look back, it's sometimes getting that counsel that people don't even know they're giving to you, by the way that they're honest about what they're doing, about how it's challenging, how it doesn't always work the way we think it's going to, but then how they're either pivoting or how they're working to improve. And that external communication for me has really been a game changer.
I would say that said it earlier, think big, but start small. I agree with Barak. Have a use case that's very specific, but you know, if you solve it, it leads to the next one, and it's reusable, and it helps you keep moving. And, you know, I think if I were to look in my crystal ball, I like to look backwards sometimes. Don't forget that back in the late 90s, it cost, like the companies like Razorfish, Seant, IBM, March 1st, they were building websites for $5 million because it took a lot of effort, and let alone 20 million data center needed to be stood up to run that website. And all that got fixed. WordPress is an amazing tool. So if you think about what Barak was saying, the entities will get it where the connectivity is built with the solution in mind, but don't wait, you know, get started, try something, and kind of help be part of the solution. And I think that's going to help us all. And what I love about higher education is we collaborate, we share, and we bring these things forward. We help the vendors get better. We help ourselves get better. And that's great that these Winter Games can bring that to light.
All right. Well, thanks, panelists. And Chris, one more thing. In 20 years, I'm hoping that you're a famous podcaster. As some of you who missed in the beginning, Chris will be releasing a Smart City podcast here shortly. So, Chris, if you want to put any information in the chat so folks can see it. Anyway, thanks everybody for attending today. And there's going to be recordings of this. Sabrina, anything to help take us out there?
Just thank you guys so much for all of the information, and thank you to our attendees for taking the time to join us. There are another set of presentations right after this. I'm going to drop that link in the chat, and you can find the schedule for the rest of the day. So thank you guys.
All right, thank you, Sabrina. Thank you, panelists.